What's up, homies? After realizing the true power of Kepaleke in our last video, I really wanted to try to make a build work using a different weapon and something besides a core skill. Why? I'm not sure. That's the way I am, I guess. So I was messing around with Sepazontec using some different basic abilities, and at first, it was feeling real bad. But to be honest, most new builds do feel pretty bad right at the beginning, so I decided to just stick with it for a day and see if I could get Thrash feeling decent. Now, the original idea was to attack so fast with Thrash that we get maximum value out of the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect, which makes it so every 15th time we deal damage to an enemy, we unleash an additional strike that deals 15% of the damage we've dealt to them in the last half second. Now, Thrash is really good at this because each strike hits multiple times, and with accelerated Thrash, it will continue to unleash its third attack if cast again within 1.5 seconds. While with Sepazontec, every single attack with our basic counts as the third attack, and so using it with Thrash will enable every swing to continue unleashing this third attack. Also with Sepazontec, every third cast of a basic skill strikes 3 times, so every third Thrash will also be releasing 3 of these whirling fire blenders. Now, activating Ravager on top of this causes every single Thrash strike to hit again for 40% damage. So with just Thrash, Sepazontec, and Ravager, we're already getting a ton of hits in. But I was really wondering if we could push this further. My first thought, and maybe an obvious pairing with basic attacks, is Pain Gorter's Gauntlets. Attack speed ranks to basic skills, and a unique effect that triggers more damage to feed our Jaguar Spirit Hall. Sounds pretty good. I tried them out, and they're feeling decent. With Ravager active, it automatically spreads the damage echo on everything, which is pretty cool. However, the DPS was still just feeling exceptionally low, especially when compared to anything using Kepaleke. Now, at the same time, I've been working on a new build for my Sorceress, which I will be releasing this weekend at some point, and she is getting a ton of value out of the unique gloves Frostburn this season. That's when the thought, Frostfire, Jaguar, hit my brain, and I was like, bro, Thrash actually has really high lucky hit chance for how fast it attacks. Ravager has an even higher lucky hit chance, and is going to be hitting every time Thrash hits. What if we can get these bonus lucky hit effects that proc fire and cold damage from Frostburn to trigger a bunch off of all those Thrash and Ravager hits, which would feed more hits and damage into the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect, accelerating it? So I put them on, and that's basically exactly what happened. I saw a massive increase to my damage from anything that I had tried so far, but only in small bursts. Elites that were taking maybe 20-30 seconds to kill before would now just be instantly disintegrated, but this wouldn't happen every time. My DPS still felt very low sometimes, so I set up to try to figure out what's happening. And I'm still not 100% sure, but my best conclusion so far is this. In this build, with all of our abilities, damage multipliers, and buffs active together, we're doing so much damage so quickly that the Jaguar Spirit Hall school is feeding back into itself, meaning we're proccing it so fast and often that 15% of the damage we've dealt in the last half second includes multiple instances of the damage from this effect itself that just happened. So imagine you're able to hit a target 30 times in half a second. From the Jaguar Spirit Hall, after the first 15 hits, 15% of the damage you've dealt in the half second before that hit will hit the target again as a new damage number. My theory is that this big number is now included in the next 15 hits required to proc the Spirit Hall. And if we can proc it again within half a second of that damage occurring, that Spirit Hall damage will feed back into the next Spirit Hall effect, making the next 15% damage pop include the damage from the previous pop, turning this big number into a giant number. Now let's take this to like the nth degree and imagine we're able to attack so fast and proc so much damage that this accelerates itself into a positive feedback loop where every instance of the Jaguar Spirit Hall damage is fed by multiple previous procs, allowing the damage to exponentially scale upwards under the right circumstances. And after some more testing, if we slow down some footage, we can see this is pretty much exactly what is happening. Our insane burst comes from these Jaguar Spirit Hall numbers piling on top of each other and quickly escalating into the billions. It's one of those curious builds where it doesn't really work at all until all of a sudden it does, and then it works like way too good. While this build is extremely fun and fascinating, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone. If your goal is just to speed farm stuff around Torment 4, once you get it online, this build can do that no problem, and it's also very easy. Just dash around while holding Thrash and pressing your cooldowns and everything will just die. However, if you're looking to push harder difficulties in the pit, the rotation becomes much more involved because of the crazy way our damage works. As we get into higher tiers, mobs start to have so much health that the only way we can kill them is to instantly blow them up with this escalating wave of damage from the Jaguar Spirit Hall. Because of the sort of exponential nature of this effect, it results in even the hardest stuff we are fighting getting just instantly deleted. So the damage output is definitely there. The hard part is getting this to happen consistently and reliably. This also results in bosses being the easiest and fastest part of the run. Even at the hardest tier you can clear, the boss will just disappear in a couple seconds with the right combo. In fact, this is probably the best bossing build I've ever played when you compare the damage to how well it clears. So with the right setup, you'll be able to insta-delete any Torment 4 layer boss in about a second. And another very unique thing is probably more than any build I've experienced in Diablo so far, this one requires proper rotation in order to deal your damage effectively at these higher tiers. And if you let that rotation drop, you'll feel a massive decrease in your DPS until you get it rolling again. If you enjoy rogue gameplay in Diablo, I think you'll really like this build because it has that same sort of feeling of having to set up your precision burst damage with all the other tools in your kit, then executing that and watching everything explode, and getting like a lot of satisfaction from that cycle. If you are planning to play this build deeper into the pit, my best advice is literally just imagine you're an assassin and wield this exponential wave of burst damage like a giant dagger. You want to go in, blast as hard as you can with it, and if everything doesn't instantly explode, you may want to actually just reset combat and try again. We're going to get a lot deeper into the rotation, but at a high level, from what I can tell, it seems like the most reliable way to get this to explode is to activate Ravager, then Armored Hide, then dive on top of your target with the Hunter ult, and just hold Thrash on them. You're trying to get as much damage through in this first second of combat as you possibly can to feed the Jaguar Spirit Hall as many numbers as possible. And if you're able to sort of break through that threshold, it will result in these Spirit Hall numbers feeding into each other and exponentially increasing into the billions until stuff just instantly evaporates. Once you do break through the threshold, you'll see it in your numbers and you can continue to transfer this stacking damage to nearby mobs as long as you're maintaining the constant Thrash hits. As soon as there's even like a half-second gap in your attacks, maybe even less than that, that's enough for the ramping damage to completely fall off and have to be restarted from scratch. Now, if this happens, we can hang in there and grind stuff down and try to slowly build this wave back up, which is possible, but the faster way is literally just resetting combat by stealthing away for a few seconds and then coming back in and trying again. Literally like rogue PvP in WoW, just get a re and then go back in. You'll find that the same mobs that were just taking you forever to kill can be instantly deleted on another attempt where you properly ramp the damage wave. Now, the way the damage actually works in this build is just so awesomely weird that I feel compelled to try to explain it to you a bit more even before you decide to play this, because it's going to feel different than literally anything you've played before. At Torment 4, once we have the right gear, we're just going to be blasting everything so quickly that you're not going to really feel what I'm talking about. The damage I'm talking about is the hundreds of billions we're trying to create to push the limits of this build up into higher pit tiers. And again, for pit pushing, I can really only recommend this to the serious gamers out there because it's actually quite challenging to pull off. However, when you do, it's extremely satisfying because all the demons are just instantly blended into flying ice chunks. I really do think there's some untapped potential here where if someone figured out exactly how to reproduce this consistently, they could push considerably higher than I show in this video. Because you can see, when it happens correctly in Pit 94, stuff just dies almost instantly, and I can kill the 94 boss within just a few seconds. So the damage is surely there. The most challenging part is getting it to reliably proc, and so almost all the time spent in these runs is just trying to line up these successful burst windows so that stuff will die in a literal second. And basically, what it seems like we need to do in order to create and then maximize this burst effect is go from dealing no damage to dealing all the damage as fast as possible. And it seems like the speed of that transition from no damage to max damage is what's extremely important. When we think about how the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect works, that kind of makes sense because it snapshots all the damage we've dealt in the last half second and then hits for a percentage of that. So the more damage we can get through in the shortest amount of time at the beginning, the bigger and more initial pops we will get, which can then exponentially feed into the next pops. What this forces us to do is basically play this build like an assassin, like we talked about. We need to insta-delete everything right away with our opening combo, otherwise it ain't dying. And that's not necessarily true. We can sit there and grind it down, but it takes much, much longer. If we can create enough hits and deal enough damage in that very first second of combat, all those hits and damage will create a positive feedback loop into the Jaguar Spirit Hall, which will cause the Spirit Hall effect to proc multiple times in under a half second, which then feeds into itself on future procs, multiplying its own damage. Think of there basically being like a burst threshold you need to cross over in order to enter the realm of billions. If we can create enough hits and damage in a short enough time to cross the threshold, it will begin to multiply itself upward and escalate to the moon until stuff is just gone. We can then carry this burst over to nearby mobs as long as we maintain our Ravager and constant Thrash hits. If we aren't able to line up enough bursts to cross the threshold, we're basically doing no damage at higher pit tiers. All of our big damage is coming from this effect. And I keep saying it, but in deeper pit, you literally want to just wield this wave of exponential burst as like your primary weapon and have it be the main thing you're thinking about and focusing on. All right, so there's sort of like so many things going on with the intricacy of how this build is interacting that are also important to how we play it. And so probably the best way to understand it is to just talk through all these things together. So we're going to talk about how it works and how to play it all in one big section. And this will make for a longer section, but if you're wanting to play the build, this is probably the most important stuff to understand. The very first thing we're basically always doing is holding down Thrash. Thrash, of course, is a basic skill and has no resource cost, so if you don't like managing resources, one of the upsides of this build is you don't have to think about Vigor at all, which is good because we have a lot of other stuff to think about. Just hold down Thrash and let it rip on whatever is closest to you. Thrash has a nice dash built into the animation, and so we basically get this teleport effect we would normally get out of the Measured Ravager upgrade just built into Thrash. And this is actually great because it lets us take the other upgrade for Ravager, which is actually goated in this build, because it lets our Ravager hit elites up to 4 extra times, which is exactly what we need to feed the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect. Ravager is hands down the most important ability to have active 100% of the time in order to ramp our DPS. Without Ravager active, your DPS will be bad. The extra hits that Ravager creates on top of every single Thrash, along with the high lucky hit procs those are creating for Frostburn to trigger the fire and cold damage, is absolutely essential for hitting fast enough to get the Spirit Hall to feed back into itself. What this means in practice is we want to press Ravager right at the start of every fight. If we're mobbing through stuff quickly, we can basically forget about it at this point because it extends its duration off of kills, and by the time it runs out, it will be off cooldown again. However, if we're fighting harder stuff like pushing in the pit that's going to take longer to kill, or like a boss, like a higher tier pit boss, we want to make sure Ravager is always up. And the way we do this is by resetting it with our ultimate. Because we have 1 point in the intricacy passive coming from our Shroud of False Death, we can now use the Hunter to reset our abilities. Every time we ult, the ability we used just before ulting will have its cooldown refreshed and gain a free charge for 5 seconds, indicated by the glowing border. What this lets us do is use the Hunter immediately after any ability cooldown we want to reset. So if we're fighting harder stuff and don't think Ravager will be extended long enough from kills to keep it active, we want to immediately follow Ravager with ult. This will result in our Ravager giving us another free cast fit within 5 seconds. So basically we want to hit Ravager again in about 4 seconds just before the glowing border expires, and this will make it so we have a fresh duration of Ravager mid-fight while still having the cooldown available to press again when it expires. Now, once we have Ravager covered, the second most important ability to try to keep active is Armored Hide. You'll find that we're getting a ton of uptime on the Hunter ultimate with this build. Not only does it reset itself off of kills, we are reducing its cooldown by half through our ring tempers, and we're also feeding constant cooldown reduction into it through the Wildfire glyph. You'll find that especially as you're killing stuff, the Hunter is up very often in this build, and that's not by accident. Using the Hunter is the only window where we truly reach our attack speed limit of 195% because it overflows our ferocity by 4, and when combined with Duelist, this puts us at a total of 13 stacks in this build, just 1 short of the cap. Now, using the aspect of Plane's power, which creates Mystic Circles, as soon as we have 13 stacks, they will stay at maximum as long as we are casting within our circle. And Mystic Circles, along with aspect of Plane's power, is another huge part of our DPS equation. Because we're stacking Mystic Circle potency as our offensive temper along with the Ritual Glyph, you'll find that your DPS will literally skyrocket when fighting in a circle. The cool thing about this is most of the time it just procs directly under you as you line up your burst, so it's not really something you have to think about a ton. Alright, back to our second most important cooldown to try to keep active, which is Armored Hide. This isn't as essential as Ravager, but you'll notice a significant DPS increase while Armored Hide is active. This is because it refreshes your resolve stacks and simultaneously gives you 100% additional block chance, which feeds directly into your crit damage scaling through aspect of redirected force. So depending on how good your aspect rolls are, you'll get somewhere around 500-600% extra critical strike damage just from pressing this button. It also activates our tiny bit of thorns, which create more hits to proc Jaguar Spirit Hall, by the way, as well as heal us when we dodge through stuff, which feeds into our temerity barrier we'll get to in a sec. Now, you'll notice this build has remnants of infinite evade, partly because I just can't get away from always having my evade up, but we ended up actually needing it in a pretty big way for this build. The rune setup we're seeing on almost every Spiritborn build these days is Pak K combined with Zol Zal. Because the Rod of Kepaleke has such insane resource consumption, It feeds Poc K to constantly proc the Druid Barrier, and this barrier constantly procking feeds Zolzal to constantly generate 20% increased life. As soon as you take away that insane resource consumption from Kepaleke and try to use something like a basic attack, it gets much harder to reliably proc our runes. For this reason, we are completely foregoing the Druid Barrier K and just instead running Temerity. Temerity will give us a 100% max life barrier by itself to fully scale the Viscous Shield without any barrier gen required, as well as the lucky hit effect to constantly keep it at full. Any other source of healing will also feed into our max life barrier. It also has the percent max life of Fix we are now missing from giving up Banished Lord's Talisman, so we can still accomplish that big max health scaling our damage with Viscous Shield. Something else we lost from Kepaleke that's really big is the guaranteed crits, and that hurts. And so we need to figure out how to scale up to 100% crit chance now as well. And a big part of how we're doing this, honestly, is through evading, because we can get a lot of crit chance that way, actually. So with 4 points in the Mirage passive, every time we evade, we're getting 20% increased critical strike chance for 3 seconds. And then if we combine this with the Semgar rune word on our weapon, every evade will give us 7.5% crit chance, stacking up to 25%. So by simply evading every 3 seconds, we are getting a bonus of 45% critical strike chance. Now, what we're doing to squeeze the maximum value out of this strategy is adding Thunder Spike to our bar. And to be honest, it's always been there. It's never left my bar, guys. This will make it so every evade automatically hits with Thunder Spike, which as a basic skill with Sepazontec will be benefiting from all the same multipliers as Thrash. So not only will this actually be doing sort of decent damage now, every evade will actually create vulnerability from having Thunder Spike attached. Also with Sepazontec, our third evade strikes with Thunder Spike 3 times, just like the olden days, and hey, look, more hits to feed our Jaguar effect. We are using Adaptive Stances as our key passive combined with Dex rolls on gear and the Headhunter glyph to reach over 4,700 dexterity. Fully built with the proper masterworks, I expect this build to crest well over 5,000 dex. A huge chunk of this is going to be coming from our Adaptive Stances key passive, which increases our core stats by 50% every time we use an ability with a different base spirit school. Additionally, the extra school effect that will be active almost all the time from using Thrash is the 30% attack speed attached to Jaguar, which is essential actually for hitting our attack speed threshold for the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect. The main thing to consider here is that this bonus only activates when using skills from different Spirit Halls, so this is a perfect time to jump back into our rotation. We press Ravager at the start of every fight, and if we're going to be killing stuff, we don't need to reset it with ult like we talked about. After activating Ravager, the next priority is activating Armored Hide. This will max our resolve stacks, give us Unstoppable, and feed 100% additional block chance into our damage through Redirected Force. It will also activate Thorns, which will proc more hits for the Jaguar Spirit Hall both when we get hit and when we dodge through stuff, and heal us to feed our Temerity barrier as we dodge through stuff to create vulnerability and keep our crit chance active. We follow our first Armored Hide cast immediately with the Hunter ult right on top of whatever we're going after. This will reset Armored Hide cooldown and give us an additional free cast of it within the next 5 seconds, so as soon as that first use is about to expire in about 3 seconds, press it again before the glowing border goes away. As this second duration is about to run out, press it again with the refreshed cooldown that is waiting under that free use. This lets us get 3 total uses or about 10 seconds of active Armored Hide out of a single ult cast. Now, often what happens if we're killing stuff quickly is the Hunter resets itself from kills during this window, so as soon as we cast that third use of Armored Hide, we can ult again to reset the cooldown and give us the free charge again. And now we want to basically keep this rotation between Armored Hide and ult active as long as we can. The other very important thing this does in the background is weave a Gorilla skill into our rotation every few seconds, which is what is required to keep that 50% stat bonus active from our Adaptive Stances key passive. This is also needed to proc the 20% extra max life we are getting from Resilient, which results in big damage scaling through Viscous Shield. Again, always prio Ravager for the ult reset first, but if you're killing stuff and your Ravager uptime is good, you want to try to get as close to 100% uptime on your Armored Hide active as you can by using this rotation. Something very important to keep in mind, if your Armored Hide ever does go on cooldown, you will no longer be automatically activating the 50% core stat bonus from Adaptive Stances, since all the other skills you're rotating are also Jaguar skills. And this is actually a very easy fix with Thunder Spike already on our bar. All we need to do to keep Adaptive Stances active and our giant amount of dex up without Armored Hide is weave a quick Thunder Spike cast in by actually pressing it on our bar every 5 seconds or so. And we just need to do this until Armored Hide is back off cooldown, then we can be using Armored Hide with the ult rotation as our main source of that alternating school. Now, when the Hunter finally does go on full cooldown, it will be reduced by half from our ring tempers, and we will be getting continuous lucky hit procs from the Wildfire glyph to constantly reduce its cooldown, making the actual cooldown about a quarter of the time it normally is. So you'll have your Hunter back in about 10 to 15 seconds while fighting stuff, which is just slightly longer than the length we can keep Armored Hide active. And so in general, you'll find you have your ult up very often to constantly reset Ravager and Armored Hide like we're talking about. Also, like we mentioned, this overflows your ferocity stacks to 13, and then as long as you're casting within a Mystic Circle, it will stay at 13. And since Mystic Circle lasts 10 seconds, it basically lets us carry those overflowed ferocity stacks with us until we can cast ult again. The other thing this ult tempo does is keep active the giant damage multipliers from the passives in our skill tree, Supremacy and Resolution, which with the extra rank from Shroud will be giving us a 40% multiplicative damage increase from Supremacy and 20% damage increase from Resolution, doubled to 40% against bosses. Alright, so the final ability on our bar is Counterattack, and should really only be used as a defensive or to engage. I still end up pressing Counterattack too often, and it accidentally consumes my ult reset, or eats the CDR coming from the Wildfire glyph, which we don't really want. I mainly use Counterattack active to dodge everything as I engage, so I don't get one-tapped as I sort of spool up my damage and multipliers and barrier, but it can also be used sort of reactively to dodge big attacks, or just in general as a defensive if you're in a tough spot. Keep in mind that with 4 ranks in Mirage, we are already at 80% increased dodge chance while evading, so with our base dodge stat and the counterattack passive, evading will also put us at 100% dodge, just like the active does. A big reason we are using counterattack is for the extra automatic hits that happen when we dodge. Every dodge now equals an extra attack that helps trigger the Jaguar Spirit Hall effect and feeds a bit of extra damage into it. We're also getting this nice 30% damage multiplier on close enemies from the reinforced upgrade. Alright, so putting it all together. Once you've spooled up, the rotation is fairly simple. Just make sure Ravager is active, then rotate Armored Hide with ult like we discussed, while holding down Thrash. To get spooled up, if we're about to kill a bunch of stuff, we want to press Ravager, then Armored Hide, then ult right on top of whatever we're about to kill. This will reset Armored Hide to be used 3 times like we discussed, and right after the third use of it in about 10 seconds or so, we can ult again to use it 2 more times. Keep juggling this rotation between ult and Armored Hide as long as Ravager is staying active. If stuff isn't dying fast enough to extend Ravager's duration, start using your ult reset on Ravager instead of Armored Hide. As soon as you find you have extra ults while Ravager is active, start transitioning them to resetting Armored Hide instead. If you ever mess up this rotation, which I still do very often, and Armored Hide goes on full cooldown, what you're going to have to do is use an actual cast of Thunder Spike from your bar every 5 seconds or so to keep the Dex active from adaptive stances. We're also going to be losing out on that 20% health from Resilient until we are able to cast Armored Hide again. The other important thing to keep in mind is we want to evade through stuff at least every 3 seconds to keep vulnerability and our crit chance up. And there's really a nice rhythm you'll start to feel where you can quickly dash between each sort of burst of Thrash, and there's even a little animation cancel that happens, and combined with the short auto dash that kind of happens automatically on Thrash, this lets us seamlessly kind of jump across the battlefield to close the distance on anything we need to hit. I basically never let go of R&B in this build, which is where I have Thrash bound and am constantly just moving my mouse to find the next target after the one in front of me explodes in flying ice chunks. Finally, I use counterattack to save myself, or at the very beginning of this combo so I don't get one shot as I do everything else. So you could use it like right at the beginning before you even press Ravager, before you like ship it in and do your big combo. For something like a boss encounter, we do basically the same thing, except ult reset prio is fully on Ravager since it's not going to be extending its duration from kills. So like to delete a tormented boss, right as they're coming in, you can evade a bit a few times to activate your crit chance, then press counterattack so you don't die, then Armored Hide to stack your resolve, then your normal Ravager followed by ult on top of them, which resets Ravager to be used again, overflows our resolve and creates the Mystic Circle, then we evade through them once to make them vulnerable, and finally just hold Thrash. And that will just cause the maximum Thrash burst window, and once you're geared up and everything's set up properly, this will make any Torment 4 boss just instantly evaporate, the exception being Andariel. You just got to do one phase or little pillars, and then she's gone as well. Just put them in the fire blender, and out comes loot. Will it blend? Will it blend? And that's about it. Like I said, it's a pretty involved rotation, but it's extremely rewarding when pulled off correctly because demons literally just evaporate in this fire blender explosion, and the only thing left are these little ice chunks just like soaring through the air. A couple quick out-of-combat tips. We are going to be extremely slow with no move speed built in. So what we can do to resolve this is quickly attack the air once with Thunder Spike, and that's going to activate the 30% move speed from adaptive stances. And then if we wait a couple seconds, our Shroud will cloak us and give us another 40% move speed on top of that. So we can still be at 170% move speed stealth zooming around. And to go even faster than this and even faster than 200% move speed, we can just infinitely evade. And with the right boot setup, we don't even need to hit anything. We can just keep pressing evade over and over and over again with infinite cooldown. GG. Alright guys, we're going to go through the gear a little more in depth than I've been doing in my previous videos, just because of how important it is for this build and how different it is probably from a lot of Kepeleke setups, but it's also similar in a lot of ways as well. And so we're just going to kind of go through it together here so I can talk about the main things that are going to be important. So one of the biggest things, well, starting off with Frostburn. So this is like going to be a core piece of what makes the pop coming from the Jaguar Spirit Hall that much like real and bigger. It's also going to carry a huge percentage of our attack speed, and if you're able to get GA attack speed ones and hit that with a couple masterworking crits like seen here, like with a GA attack speed double crit, I'm at 37% attack speed from these gloves at 12. And these gloves are good enough where like the ideal would be like GA on all four, because all four are going to be doing great things. Like the cold and fire are going to be feeding into that burst window you have. The fire and cold damage just going to be additive under all your Jaguar skills, because those are all fire, right? And so I think if I had to rank them, it would probably be in the order you see here, where attack speed first, fire and cold damage second, and then the two lucky hits right after that, as far as like what you would want your GAs and masterworking on. But you know, there's cases for every affix on these being good. I think really the main ones you want to go for are the attack speed. We want to try to cover a big percentage of our attack speed through this top roll here. The only thing that's not really important on these is the percentage roll on the lucky hit to freeze. That's not going to do a ton for us except a little bit of extra crowd control, so don't worry about that lucky hit effect too much. All right, so the other big piece is the Shroud of False Death, and this is kind of like a crazy chess piece, and it's, I don't know if you saw, but it's becoming like super meta. As of like a week ago, everyone has started using it in all their builds, and there's a couple of reasons why that is. Really, the main ones are it has huge max life value, which got buffed, along with a couple of the mythics got their max life rolls buffed. The ones that had max life rolls, so like Shaco, this one, I think it's a base value of 800 or 1,000 now. But you can see, even without a GA on it, just masterwork critting it twice, we can get it to over 1,500 max life roll, which is just huge on an item. And if you're running something like Banished Lord's Talisman or now Temerity that have these percentage max life rolls, the bigger those base values, the further these percentage increases are going to go, right? So the max health is huge, and all that's working off the viscous shield Paragon node, which if you don't know, this is bugged. And so basically every Spiritborn build you're going to see during Season 6 is going to be using Viscous Shield. If they're not, they're going to be at a huge damage disadvantage. And the goal here is we're trying to always have 100% barrier, and then we're trying to build our max life as high as possible, because this is scaling based on the difference between your base life and your barrier, not your max life and your barrier. So if you can scale your barrier absolutely gigantic mondo by building giant max life, you're going to get a crazy multiplicative damage coming out of Viscous Shield that's much higher than the 33% shown in the tooltip. So you can see that strategy reflected basically everywhere else. We have max life roll here, but everywhere else we can get a max life roll, we're trying to get it. So we GA max life roll on helm, GA max life roll on boots, and on rings, you could go for GA max life or GA dex rolls. I went for dex, really trying to push this dex scaling with the percentage we have on our necklace. And when we activate adaptive stances, this increases by 50%. So we're closing in on 5,000 dexterity in this build. And you can see we have like no move speed base, so we're super slow, but I'll show you those tricks I was just talking about. So in town, we can evade at least more than once now, but we don't get the reset happening with the attacks. But once we get anywhere where combat is enabled, we can literally just infinitely evade. And what you need to do that is the Sepazontec stuff happening with Thunder Spike, but also boots with attacks reduce evades cooldown. And then I threw this extra evade cooldown reduction on there because we literally don't need move speed, and I'll show you why. So Shroud just activated to give us 40% move speed. If I attack once with Thunder Spike, that activates 30% move speed from adaptive stances. Now I'm at 70%. So if you ever want to be at 70% move speed without having any, you can just do that, and you're going to be kind of cruising. But faster than that is we can literally just do this, and we will literally never run out of evade charges. You can do this forever, and so we can travel super fast, get anywhere we need to go, just infinitely evading still. And then we can see here, if I follow an Eagle skill with a Jaguar skill or any other type of skill, I'm up to 4,700 dex, so almost a 600% skill damage multiplier. And that's because I'm doing this crazy dex boosting, trying to get not only max health on every piece, but dex in every piece. So it's basically, you see all these orange pieces, all three of them are dex max life, and which one you try to GA is kind of up to you. You can try to lean further into this dex scaling, or you can try to lean further into the max life scaling. I think it's still kind of like up in the air which one's going to give you more max damage in the end. I think probably max life with the broken viscous thing is going to give you a little bit more. So if you absolutely had to pick one, I would probably pick max life. But still, even with max life GAs and masterwork and crits, you still want dex rolls on these four pieces. And this is like not masterworked as good as I want it to be. I think my ideal would be 2 hits on max resolve and 1 on the dex percentage, because it's GA'd, right? But this is like dream necklace for this build, is like GA dex, GA max life, re-roll the 3rd slot to crit chance. And you can see between our rings, I actually just re-rolled. I had, so dex max life, and then I re-rolled the 3rd one attack speed, dex max life. I had this rolled to attack speed, but we are now successfully kind of over our attack speed threshold, so I just re-enchanted that attack speed over to critical strike chance, and this still puts us at 195% attack speed all spooled up, but helps us get closer to that 100% crit chance. And we can see, like, if I just spawn some guys, and let's just like do our little combo here. So like if you're looking to fight stuff, go in on stuff. If it's stuff you're gonna be killing, you want to counterattack real quick, then Ravager, then Armored Hide, then dive in, then hold Thrash, and sort of evade through stuff as you're holding it. But we can see if we do that, see 195%. So we are at, when we're in our Mystic Circle with our stacks after, and we're also getting 20% from Moonrise here. Let me take this off real quick. So you can see without Moonrise, so I'm still at 187% without Moonrise, and without that attack speed roll. So what I'm actually going to do, guys, is we're going to move this, attack speed roll, this enchant, like we did this one, over to either critical strike chance or the Vuln one, because we actually, turns out we can, without this ring, we can just get to attack speed. We're right there. We're literally point, without that ring, we're point, we were like 0.7% off of where we were. And you can see once I have my glyph spooled up from the dodging, we're at 70% crit chance. And when I put this guy back on, here, hold on, let me get my ult back up. Yeah, so it turns out we can basically get rid of this second attack speed roll also. So between everything we got rolling, we're going to be at 195% attack speed. And if we were running Jaguar secondary, which gives us that last ferocity stack, we would be at 200%, I think. But since we're running Gorilla for the permanent unstoppable and next resolve, we're going to be just at 13 instead of 14. But that's all Gucci, because we're getting big value out of the Gorilla secondary because we are still doing resolve stacking. So kind of the two broken things that you're going to see almost every Spiritborn build doing is the Viscous Shield barrier health scaling, which we talked about, and then this other broken interaction, which is Redirected Force combined with Interdiction combined with Resolve. And so basically what we do is through these temper rolls, and in this build we're going to be doing it on our necklace and on our helmet, which is our highest priority temper in this build by far, by the way. The tempering scaling is broken on this, where it'll increase by 50% when you crit it instead of 25%. So if you can crit it 3 times, which is extremely hard to do, I've still never done it yet, and wasted a lot of resources trying, you can get it to plus 14 resolve stacks on a single piece. And you can see even hitting it twice is really good. And this would be like the next best thing, is like hitting resolve twice and max life once. And so it'll be at plus 9 once you get to Masterwork 12 if you hit it twice, but if you can hit it 3 times, it will be at plus 14. And if you only hit it once, it will be at plus 6, and if you don't hit it at all, it will be at plus 4. And this is a huge portion of our damage scaling, because basically what's happening is this aspect of interdiction gives you block per resolve stack. So if we can get a bunch of resolve stacks, we can stack a bunch of block. But this value coming from this aspect goes over 100%. So like in our stat window, it shows block chance capped at 100%, but the value getting fed into this will exceed 100%, and that feeds into redirected force. So gain critical strike damage equal to some percentage of your block chance. Blocking doubles this bonus for 10 seconds. So we get basically just a massive amount of critical strike damage now by getting these resolve stack tempers, and then as soon as you hit Armored Hide, you're at full resolve stack. So with these two pieces at 9 and 6, and the Gorilla Secondary, I'm at 25 resolve stacks, which is pretty good. You can get up to, let's see, it would be, I think you can get up to 38 in this build. So I'm definitely like still a ways off of the potential, and that would be if you, all you have to do to get that is hit this 3 times and hit this 3 times. I say all you have to do. That's hard to do, but if you do manage to triple hit these resolve stack tempers, that's going to put you at plus 14 here, plus 14 here, plus the 8 base, plus the 2 from the school. So yeah, fucking 38 resolve stacks. That's pretty giant. So basically, max health and resolve stacks are what's giving us a huge chunk of our damage scaling. And again, like we talked about, when we're fighting and trying to keep Armored Hide active, what that does, you can see my critical strike damage just under 3,000. When I use Armored Hide, boom, it's up almost 600%, because what it's doing is it's feeding the 100% block chance it gives me into redirected force, which is giving me increased crit chance based off of that 100% block, right? Okay, I know I'm jumping around a lot, but that's really the only way to do this with this build. So the other huge thing on Shroud of False Death is the +1 to all passive. So besides the max life, this is probably the biggest thing that makes this chest piece OP, not just for Spiritborn, but for every other class. You can see if I pop open my skill tree, what this does is literally gives me 1 rank in every single passive. And like, you know, that combined with the +12 follow through on my Sepazontec is getting stuff like my follow through to rank 16. It's boosting all these little things like Apex, so we're getting another, you know what, 3% off Apex, getting another 4% off of Unrestrained Power, getting a little extra crit chance off of Mirage, getting a little extra damage reduction off of Perseverance, you know, this free sort of poison healing stuff, free 10% block chance, free thorns with increase to thorns with a barrier, free barrier accumulation from Auspicious. It would be free execute if we were using any damaging gorilla skills, another 5% max health from Resilient, an extra evade charge, extra 10% multiplicative damage on Potent, extra 0.5% per stack of Ferocity on Furnace, extra 10% on Supremacy, and extra 10% on Resolution, 5% against Elites, 10% against bosses. And then we can do stuff like this, where we need 1 point in Intricacy, and we'd normally have to get 1 in this and 1 in this to get there, so that's 2 skill points. With Shroud, we don't have to path that anymore. We can literally just let that activate on its own and use those 2 skill points elsewhere. So anyways, if you add up all the extra little multipliers and multiply them against each other that we're getting in our passive skill tree from the Shroud of False Death, it's actually a huge amount of extra damage value. And then I think most people aren't that interested in this damage after next attack when stealth thing, but with the way we're trying to sort of burst with this build and have that first burst window like ramp into this like exponential damage curve where all this damage is happening so fast that it's feeding into itself, and the faster we do this, it's a huge ramp effect. I really think this 500% damage on next attack is helping feed this, because trying it with Shroud of False Death versus a chest like this, like, now maybe if you had a better chest that was like plus 14 resolve stacks, it would be a better look, but comparing it to something like this, which is the best chess piece I have, that's just like an aspect on it, like a night and day difference between our DPS output and like how strong it feels. And so I think these two items, Frostburn and Shroud of False Death, are going to be basically essential if you're wanting to make this build work. And then to activate the resolve stacking we were talking about, we need a good roll of the interdiction aspect, as good of a roll as we can get, and put that on our helmet. And then we need a good roll of redirected force, as good as we can get, and put that on amulet. And then we're building literal dex and max life everywhere else we can get it. And then for the third roll on our helmet, I think lucky hit chance is a really good option to feed our Frostburn and our temerity heal. For boots, I think Ravager ranks is actually a huge deal. And so if you can find dex max life boots that are attacks reduce evades cooldown, and then you can reroll the third, enchant the third one to be Ravager. Ravager ranks actually add a huge amount to our DPS. Like the difference between Ravager rank 1 to when I put 4 more points in it and Ravager rank 5 made a huge difference in like the explosion pop happening from the Jaguar Spirit Hall, right? For the third affix on our amulet and our rings, like I was saying, I had attack speed here. I think we can actually move that now to critical strike chance. So we want to get, so really we're just trying to cover as much critical strike chance as we can where we can get it. We're trying to get, for our third roll here we can go for it, for our third roll here we can go for it, and for our third roll here we can go for it. The other option is you can do what I do, whereas like as you're scaling this build up, you can have these be attack speed enchanted, and then you can always like try to re-roll them later to something else. But I think maybe the ideal setup, and what I will probably have in the planner, is this one, instead of crit strike chance, have this one be the chance to proc vulnerability. I need to like test some stuff to make sure I'm still at the attack speed cap just fine in like most cases, but if I am, I would probably move this. You could move it to crit chance if you're really confident in your dodging. Like if you're always having vulnerability up because you're constantly, you know, dipping, and if you like dodging as part of the mechanic, I would just do this to crit strike chance. But if you're not a big dodger, or if you find that you're not having a big amount of uptime, vuln uptime from your dodging, then I would reroll this one to be the lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable. And so that might be what I put in the planner, because that might probably will be like the most balanced. And I think that might even be good for someone like me that does like to dodge, just because it'll sort of guarantee vulnerability. You can see even when I'm dodging a lot here, like I still have vulnerability fall off on 2 or 3 at a time, you know, as I'm kind of like working my way back and forth every 3 seconds. So yeah, so, and then we're doing redirected on necklace to get the 50% extra value, because that's the biggest aspect for our damage scaling. So those two together with the resolve stacks, we kind of got covered. These two we got covered. Temerity is fully, here, let's just do boots real quick, which we talked about already. We're doing duelist on this to increase our max ferocity. So 4 base ferocity plus 5 from a max roll of duelist puts us at 9, plus the ult overflowing for 4 more will put us at 13 resolve, which is 5 per stack when we ult. And then with our mystic circle under us, that'll stay at 13. As long as we're in our mystic circle, right? And then for the tempers here, I did, for utility, I did thrash size on both of these to get it to 100%. And I think that's important because the more stuff that's around, the bigger your thrash, the more it can cleave with every attack, which generates more hits. More hits equals more damage getting fed into the exponential ramping of the Jaguar School Hall. So you can see like a lot of the stuff I'm doing is like completely focused around how do I hit more often? I need to hit as many times as I can in a short amount of time as possible, just trying to feed as many hits as I can. And even the little things, like every time we dodge, counterattack adds a hit. If we have Armored Hide active and we go through stuff, it hits with thorns. You know, there's just like every time we evade, we hit with Thunder Spike as well. And so basically just, and then extra, you know, double damage lucky hits from here. We're just trying to squeeze like as many damage hits as like possible to really like proc the crazy value of this Jaguar School, right? Okay, so there's boots, and then temerity. This is basically replacing, which we talked about previously, the entire like rune setup that all the big like every like main Spiritborn build with Kepaleke is using Pak K, which gives you the barrier based off resource consumption, and then also Zolzal, which gives you max health based on triggering an ability from another class, and so getting the druid barrier gives you the health, and you're spending so much resource that that's just constantly active to where you constantly have a barrier and you constantly have that activated. So in this build where we're not spending any resource, we have to figure out completely something completely different to do with our runes. And so in order to accomplish 100% barrier active all the time, especially since we're not using anything like Gorilla that gives us barrier or anything like that, Temerity just seems like by far the best option to give us a reliable, and not only does this give us a reliable 100% barrier to give us that damage scaling from Viscous Shield, it also has a big percentage max life roll to replace the one we launched on Banished Lords, and it also has this lucky hit chance to heal, which will actually feed into the barrier itself. And so not only does this give us 100% barrier, all the thrashing damage we're doing and the lucky hitting is helping feed that barrier and constantly keep it at 100%, right? Is it too intense in here with this music? I'm fucking right here hitting everything. Should I go back out? All right, we're here and the music was making me nervous in there. So we're gonna relax a little bit out here. Okay, so that's Temerity, and that's basically covering our shield. And so what are we doing with our runes now that we're not doing the Pake Zolzal thing? So I think this is like up for experimentation. I think you should mess with this if you can find something else that works better. But for right now, what I've come up with that feels the best is Semgar. This is going to make it so every time we cast Evade, we get 7.5% crit chance. So after a couple of evades within 5 seconds, you don't have to do them all within 5 seconds. It's like if you do one and then you do another one like 3 or 4 seconds later, and then another one like 3 or 4 seconds after that, this will just passively stack up to 25% fairly quickly. And so that'll give us literally a quarter of our necessary critical strike chance that we need to get to 100%. And then we are also running Bokzal, and this is going to make it so traveling 20 meters activates the max life barrier for 6 seconds. So this basically means every 6 seconds we have to be moving at least 20 meters, which with the auto dash that happens on Thrash, the evading we're doing with Thunderspike to get our crit chance up and activate vulnerability actually like happens like quite a bit, like kind of automatically. So these two together basically making it so evading and moving around is what activates our crit chance, which are runes, or activates our runes, which are crit chance for this one, and our max life for this one, which is damage scaling with Viscous Shield, right? And so I think value-wise, like from the ritual runes, these are our best ritual runes, but it's just a matter of like how do we activate them the best, and this is the best sort of activation I've found so far. But if you find something better or have a different idea altogether, I would love to, see that kind of stuff in the comments. And then for our rings, we talked about the affixes for our tempers here. We're going for Mystic Circle potency on both of these, and then we're also going for Mystic Circle potency for our offensive temper on necklace, and that's going to give us like 60%. I'm not even meaning to masterwork crit these, like those are like accidental masterwork crits that I would move if I could, but even without those, that's going to put us at like close to 60% Mystic Circle potency. Which is kind of crazy, especially when we combine that with, I don't have a very high level ritual glyph yet, but even with this, what's it at? Even with level 52 ritual glyph, that's giving us 11% Mystic Circle potency, and eventually we'll grab this extra int. I just don't have the points quite for it yet. There's not that much. It's maybe like one left, a couple left. But yeah, so we're getting 70% between these tempers and that rune, Mystic Circle potency, plus the extra, multiplier and damage reduction when we're actually in the circle from the additional bonus, and then the extra just free legendary multiplier on there once we get it to 46. So I really like this Mystic potency circle stack, and it really feels like when you proc the Mystic Circle and you're in it, you just go freaking burr, man. Your Thrash just like goes off. Your Blender just hits hyperdrive. The other really important temper we're doing on our rings is the Hunter cooldown reduction. And you can see I barely made it on this ring. This was the last temper after getting restored. So 12 tempers, and we finally hit what we needed on the last one. I was like so nervous. I freaking hate tempering so much. Tempering and masterworking are terrible in this game. I hate them. The feel bad is so much worse than the feel good. You know what I mean? Like, the feel good doesn't outweigh the feel bad, like, not even close. And I have way more feel bads when I'm doing them. Those are like, I literally, like, get some anxiety from having to go temper good gear because I'm afraid I'm going to brick it, which is stupid as hell. Anyways, for aspects on these guys, we're going Plains Power for the crazy Mystic Circle, Potency, like multiplicative increase, and then Moonrise for the attack speed combined with the 80% basic skill damage, kind of like a no-brainer for anything using a basic skill, and now anything using a core skill with Kepaleke. Almost all of them are rocking Moonrise, very strong aspect. And then getting to kind of the star of the show at the end here, Sepazontec, our unique quarterstaff for the basic attack buffage. And I'm a little torn on this one. I'm not quite sure if follow through or the basic skills chance to deal double damage would be better. I literally don't know. It's like follow through is going to give you a better base multiplier on the ones that are happening, which I like. I like building base damage over like chance type stuff. So, and also because that's the Sepazontec I got, was with, my buddy gave this to me actually. Thanks, A-Rob. Love you. Because I got a GA on follow through with 100% a fix roll, it just kind of makes sense to try to masterwork crit what you have GA'd a lot of the time, because think about masterworking, it's giving you a 25% increase on those crits. So a GA is a bigger base value. And so if you increase a bigger base value by the same percentage, you're going to get more scaling out of that. So if you have an affix that's GA'd and an affix that's GA'd here and an affix that's not GA'd, the same percentage is going to scale that GA'd affix more. And so if you have either, I would say if you have either of these GA'd or dexterity even. So if you find a Sepazontec with dexterity GA or basic skills to deal double damage GA or follow through GA, I think all three of those would work. What you really need is like as close to 100% as possible on this unique affix. And I think if I had to rank these, probably follow through would be the best, but just barely. And I think this basic skills chance to deal double damage is like right behind it. And like, if you could get a masterwork, if you could get like a GA on the basic skills to deal double damage and then masterwork crit it like 3 times and get it close to like 100%, that might be actually like what's best for this build specifically because of what we're trying to do with this like damage explosion with Thrash. But on the same token, like we can also get an extra, 30% multiplier underneath all of them by going with this follow through stack. You can see my follow throughs, because the way Sepazontec works, every single attack is a third cast. So we're getting 64% multiplier from this 16 ranks and follow through, and 12 of that, 75% of that's coming from our Sepazontec roll and crit. So if that were half, we'd be losing some significant part of that multiplier, but we might be hitting our basic skills, or our basic skills might be dealing double damage more often. And we can also really lean into like the crazy deck scaling off of adaptive in our necklace. The other really important thing I missed up here, guys, is you really want the most important thing on necklace, besides like the resolve stack temper, which you can get, on any necklace you find, is this percent dexterity. It's like app GA, like more than the max life. Like you want percent dexterity GA. Max life is like secondary for necklace. I know you want max life GA like everywhere else, but specifically for necklace, the GA you really need is the dexterity. And you can see, even if you completely miss all the masterwork crits, which I didn't mean to do, I would have liked to hit dex at least once, excepting hitting resolve all 3 times. It's still at 30% when you're at rank 12, which just does a crazy amount for all the other decks we're building. And then, like I was showing you, when we activate adaptive stances, that just has a huge jump from 50% getting added. So make sure you're looking for that there. But I was going to say, with a good one of those there, the value of this dex on Sepazontec also goes up. So I think if you can't get one with follow through or the basic skills deal double damage, I think a good third option would be having it on dex, having the GA on dex. And again, like the main thing that's going to be important here is the 100% basic skills roll. And I think for masterworking, like I was saying, like basically trying to crit whatever you have the GA on, I think is going to be your best look. And I think it's going to be hard to go wrong, like hitting follow through or this chance for basic skills to deal double damage. I think both of those are going to be really good. And I think dex is going to be a little bit behind those, still pretty good. And I think the lucky hit chance is like still good for this build, but like lowest priority out of what these affixes are going to give us, right? Boom. So that's basically it. I'll just show you guys like what the stats are at when we're just chilling here. But we get, like I was showing you, we get like a lot more going when we're actually in there proccing stuff. Just real quick, again, to show the power of adaptive stances, it's bringing us to a consistent almost 5,000 dexterity. Like if I had hit that once with a masterworking, and even just a little more Paragon, we'd be at 5,000 with that % increase. And that's going to be happening, like if you're thrashing constantly, every time you use another skill, that's going to go active. So it's active for 5 seconds. You can see, and this is why rotating it with Armored Hide is so powerful, is because if I can Armored Hide, then ult, then I'm just attacking and it's active, right? And Armored Hide's back up again from the ult thing, so I press it again. Now it's active for another 5 seconds. Now I press it again, and it's active for another 5 seconds. So it's basically, as you're doing the Armored Hide rotation that I talked about at the beginning, or in the How to Play section, you're going to automatically be keeping that up. And you can see it's doing an incredible amount for other stats as well. It's bringing us over 1,000 dex, which is, or 1,000 strength, which is giving us 21% crit chance, huge. It's giving us resource generation we don't need, but 22% resist, which doesn't hurt. And then, you know, a little overpower damage and healing received, not a big deal. But this will activate any nodes you're missing on your Paragon board, like stats-wise. That's going to bring them online. Like this one I'm over anyways, but, you know, anything like on your 5th board that's needing some value to get over the threshold is just going to be like way over in this build. All right, very last thing I forgot to mention on gear is gems. Because we're not doing the Pot K thing, we don't need barrier generation out of our gems, so we can just use more dexterity, and again, that feeds into all the juicy dexterity stacking we were just talking about. Ba-boom. That's it for this one. We'll end here by showing you the rest of the setup I used in this footage, but if you're looking to play this build yourself, I recommend referencing the build planner, which is linked down in the description, since that's going to show the ideal setup instead of what is shown here, which is just the best I could put together in the previous week of testing this. Also, any updates to the build based on new patches or future information will be referenced in the planner. If you enjoyed the video or found it valuable, don't forget to give it a like and share it with the homies, and if you want to see more cool off-meta build stuff, consider subscribing. With that, I thank you so much for watching. Remember to take care of yourself and have fun out there. Catch you in the next one. Peace.